Okay. Good morning, everybody. Good morning to you. Thank you for coming to the Licensing Committee on Wednesday, the 11th of September. We've just had the fire alarm. Would everybody please make sure that their mobile phones are switched off, even though I'm sure that the chairman would like the fine to go to his charities. I will. Julie, we're cooking, are we?
Yes, we are.
Okay. All members happy to agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of June 2024, which can be found on pages 3 to 5 of the agenda pack. All in agreement? Thank you. I'll sign the minutes. Thank you, Julie. Julie, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, we do. We have apologies from Councillor Robin Hunter-Clark, Councillor Tina Cadell, Councillor Crane, the portfolio holder, and Sarah Woolston-Holmes-Smythe, the legal services manager.
Thank you, Julie. Urgent business? I don't have any urgent business. Do we have any urgent business on the floor? Craig? Keith? No? Declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations? Thank you. We don't have any non-members wishing to address the meeting, and so we will move on to the Licensing Committee Performance Report. Craig Fowler, Environmental Health and Licensing Manager, to present the report, which can be found on pages 6 to 9 of the agenda pack and is just for members to note. Thank you, Craig.
Good morning. To give you an update on licensing performance, we have some licensing performance indicators. It's therefore important to demonstrate to the committee that performance is being measured and managed. Those are included at Appendix A to that report. Also shown at Appendix A to the report is some animal licence renewals, new animal licences and the annual fees, so it's just an indication of work. The report does actually say it's within the last 12 months, but what we've actually done is just included 2 quarters because we thought that the full year was a bit confusing. So we've done the last 2 quarters, so it is actually 6 months rather than 12 months. But I can take you through that if you need to discuss that. So the report is really just for information and to keep you updated on developments and give you some assurance with regard to performance. So Q1 is Appendix A. We've got taxi licensing issued with timescales. So you've got Q4 there from last year, which is a comparison. You've then got Q1, which is April, May and June. But we did have July figures, so we have just included those as well, just for as much information as we could include. So you'll see there that there's a target of 90%. So that's issued the taxi license within timescale, and that target is 90%, and actually to achieve is 94%. So 94% target on that, which is, I believe, 3 working days, Josie, isn't it? Yeah, it's just 3 working days. So and for July there was 100%. So hopefully the next quarter is looking good. So that's the first month of the next quarter. The second PI is licensing enforcement checks. So as the report says, that it was a new PI last year. We put in a target of 20, but that has now just increased to 40. So the target was 20 per quarter, and we've just increased that to 40. So target for Q1 is showing us 20, but we have now just increased that with Organisation Development Performance to 40. So that will increase next quarter and be shown as 40, but the value is 58. So we're well within the target. 12 inspections were carried out in July, and August and September we expect that target to be met. So there's no concerns with that from our perspective. And then we've also got compliant licences. So also based on enforcement checks, how many licences were actually compliant. Again, that was a new PI. So the target, we wasn't sure what that may be. So we put a target in there of 50%. But last quarter, the compliance rate was 70% of businesses or taxis, the licence holders, excuse me, were found to be compliant. And this quarter's quarter one is 96%. So 96% of those businesses were found to be compliant. Again, we haven't got the full quarter, but July data again appears to indicate that July, August and end of September will be on target. But we've obviously got 2 months to go. So has anybody got any, I mean, I can come on to the numbers as well if you want, but is there any questions around the PIs and the targets?
I was just going to ask, with the enforcement checks, how do you decide which ones to check on? Is it completely random? Do you just go through a list alphabetically? There's quite a big jump up from last time to this time. Is it that you did the worst first and then found all your good boys in the second?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, can do if you want. Yeah, I mean.
Thank you very much for your question. I can understand, the reason why you mention it. We try to do it on a risk-based scenario, and we try to cover as much as what we possibly can. So you're quite right. So if we've got some concerns, we will work with our partners throughout and decide which ones we're going to undertake. And also, if it makes common sense, if we're in that area, we will pick up on any non-compliances. So it is quite broad, but we do focus on a risk assessment basis. Thank you.
Yeah, I think also they will be focused on intelligence as well. So if we do get complaints, they may get an enforcement check. But also if we get an intelligence from either the public, elected members, agencies, etc., then obviously we will target. So I think in answer to your question, the enforcement checks are targeted on what we believe is needed to be checked. So we will target that to, as you say, risk assessment and intelligence.
Thanks, Councillor Monument beat me to it in terms of the prioritisation question. So my question is just very simply, what's the total body of licences that you're looking across with respect to those enforcement checks, please?
Well, they could be any licensed premises. So that would include sort of premises licence. Sorry, is that answering the question? The numbers, okay. I haven't got the up-to-date figures here. I don't know if Josie's has, but we could provide some figures. I don't know if
450 licensed premises, alcohol licensing.
There are approximately 450 licensed alcohol premises, so those that are selling alcohol or with a premises licence for licensable activities under the Licensing Act. There's approximately 250 taxi licences, that's drivers and vehicles. There are 15 licensed gambling premises. That is just premises, that's not including your gaming machines in pubs, your bingo and your small society lotteries. Small society lotteries, we're at about 130 currently per year. They're the ones I can remember off the top of my head. I hope that's some sort of use. And then we are administering, I think we're at about 1,800 personal licences currently. Oh, and animal licensing, we're about 90 premises, that is.
Thank you, Josie, for that. It's obviously a slightly moving feast, but they're obviously approximate figures, so thanks for that. So if I just go on to numbers, that's just an indication of numbers in that appendix. So from the 1st of April to the 31st of July, so animal licences new. I won't go through all the numbers, but you can see them there: renewals, annual fees, applications, drivers updated, suspensions, revocations, new drivers applications, renewals for drivers, new vehicles, renewals for vehicles, transfers, surrenders or cancellations of hackney carriages, private hires and drivers, vehicle inspections, private hire operator audits, and that gives you some numbers of just what we've been doing in April to July. So I don't know if there's any questions on that or anything we can assist with.
Myself on, wouldn't it? That the performance indicators are looking very pleasing. Yeah. Josie, do you have anything to add? No? Keith?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Is that the end of your report then, Craig?
Yes, yeah, that concludes it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, committee, I've got just a brief bit of very, very good news as far as the RSPCA Paw Prints Awards for 2024. I'm very pleased to announce that Breckland Council have won an RSPCA Paw Print Award for our stray dog service for the 8th year running. Not only has Breckland won a Paw Print Award, we've maintained platinum level, which is the highest possible level. On top of this, Breckland Council have also won a gold award in the brand new kennelling category. Kennelling commending high standards in the provision of kennelling services, ensuring that animals in temporary accommodation receive the highest level of care. This category was open to all organisations that kennel dogs for animal welfare. Only 13 of these prestigious awards have been awarded throughout the whole of England and Wales, and Breckland Council is one of them. This is an exceptional achievement and clearly demonstrates Breckland Council's ongoing commitment to animal welfare and the quality of the stray dog service. I'm sure as members of the Licensing Committee you'll be very proud of this, and we'll wish to thank our officers for the dedication of the work that they undertake. It's very pleasing that an external organisation such as the RSPCA recognise the high standards of service and care being provided by Breckland Council. So thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
And we will note the next meeting, the arrangements for the next meeting on Wednesday, the 6th of November at 2024 here in the Anglia Room. And we will move on to the next meeting, which is the meeting of the Committee of the Licensing Authority. Are members happy to agree the minutes found on pages 3 to 6, held on the 12th of June, which can be found on pages 3 to 6 of the agenda pack? Are we all happy? Thank you. I'll sign the minutes. Thanks, Julie. The apologies will be the same as we had for the first meeting. I don't have any urgent business, if officers don't have any. Declarations of interest? Committee? No. And we don't have any non-members wishing to address the meeting. So we'll move on to item 6, which is the Gambling Act Statement of Principles, found on page 7 to 72. And Keith Mumford, the Food Safety and Licensing Team Leader, will present the report. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to start off with just a recap, if I may, then go through the report. Then, if it's helpful for the committee, I'll go through what the main changes of the policy statement is entailing. then I would invite questions, if that's okay with the Chair. So Section 349 of the Gambling Act 2005 requires the Council, the licensing authority, to prepare and publish a policy statement of principles, Gambling Act 2005, that it proposes to apply in exercising its licensing function. The policy will last for a maximum of 3 years, but can be reviewed and revised by the licensing authority at any time. This authority's current policy took effect in January 2022, and so the required review process must be completed by the end of 2024 to enable publication in January 2025. The report outlines the response to the consultation of the revised policy, the Gambling Act 2005. So that's paragraph 1.1. I would like now to move on to the actual consultation, if I may, and members will be able to pick that up at 1.7 in the report. The consultation of the revised Breckland Council Policy Statement of Principles, Gambling Act, took place from the 17th of June to the 11th of August 24. Breckland Council received 5 responses to the consultation. A copy of the consultation responses is contained at Appendix 1 of the report. 2 of the responses received acknowledged that they had no comments to make. A further response asked for track changes to the draft policy document and whether it could be sent out to that individual. 2 responses requested that Breckland Council produced a gambling local area profile. One of them, GamCare, independent charity who offer gambling harm support, also listed other measures that could be used by the council to support people from harm from gambling. A link was provided that gave an example of a gambling local authority profile. The second consultee, person that made consultation regarding this matter, was received by Mattershall Parish Council, but without any sort of like rationale by requesting why we should carry out the local profile. Moving on to 1.8, the local area profile specifically analyses gambling risks of harm and uses the data as a basis from which to scrutinise and possibly oppose a licensing application. The example that GamCare gave consisted of a detailed document including contextual information, methodology on problem gambling, vulnerability, risk index, vulnerability indicators and maps, location, densities and cluster maps, analysis and conclusions. Producing a gambling local profile and adopting GamCare's recommendation would be resource and time intensive and may require commissioning a specialised consultant to produce the work. It would be unlikely, without significant resources, that the work recommended by GamCare would be achieved by the 1st of January 2025, the statutory deadline for the policy review to be implemented. Moving on to 1.9, licensing officers have undertaken initial investigations into gambling harm within the district and have used information contained on available websites to give an indication of the harm from gambling within Breckland. It was found that Breckland is below the national level for low, moderate and problem gambling. The licensing team have no records of any complaints or referrals regarding gambling harm. However, it is believed it would be advantageous if regular reviews are undertaken on an annual basis to determine if an increase in gambling harm is detected within the Breckland area and update the licensing committee accordingly. The recommendation to the committee is that the committee of the licensing authority recommends to full council that they approve the proposed revised policy, but requests that officers review the need for a gambling local area profile on a yearly basis and submit the findings of the reviews to the licensing committee for consideration. That covers the report, Chair, but if you would like me to go through the main changes of the statement of principles. I think that might be advantageous for the actual members.
I think that'd be very helpful, Keith.
Thank you. So the main changes from our perspective really is really a tidying up of the policy generally. So it was easier to read. It's not for the faint-hearted, really. I mean, to go through it, it's quite detailed. But as we was going through it, obviously that we sort of like updated the gambling authorisations. That's a list of different types of premises that we've got and the population, and that can be found in section A2, and that's just a sort of like where we are at this current state of play. The other major sort of things we had a look at was the responsible authorities, because there's been some changes, especially with the actual children safeguarding. So we took the opportunity of just changing that and just refreshing. One of the more significant changes is Challenge 25 policy, and really that's coming from the Gambling Commission. And basically we had a Challenge 21, but now we would like to sort of like adopt the Challenge 25. This is a strategy that encourages everyone who is over 18 but looks under 25 to carry an acceptable ID. And we have experienced problems with people underage going in and purchasing products. The other major change that is going to come in, it's just started to now, but the main changes will come in 2025, and this is also from the Gambling Commission, is credit facilities and financial vulnerability checks with the aim of protecting established players, and this is online, from getting into financial difficulties, from habitual gambling targeted on online players. These checks can also be used to understand the extent of players' spend across different games and accounts, identify significant red flags, and the sort of checks that would be carried out would be bankruptcy and court judgments and those sort of things, everything that can be found that is in the public domain. They are the main sort of main proposals that we put before the actual committee, and if there are any questions, we'll invite that from members now. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Linda?
On the wording, I've gone through as much of this as I could get through. And yes, I didn't quite read page 72 of our thing, but I did reach page 50. I got beyond that, but I reached page 50. I was flagging a bit. And if you care to look at page 50, under the heading Unlicensed Family Entertainment Centre Gaming Machine Permits, we have a very mangled opening sentence, which rather suggests that AI has got further than we thought, because the premises are being invited to make the application. It goes, where premises do not hold a premises license, but wishes to provide category D gaming machines, it may apply to the licensing authority of this permit. Then it says it should be noted that the applicant must show that the premises will be wholly or mainly used for making gaming machines available for use. I looked at it and I looked at it again. I carried on and went back and I thought, that's crazy. It could so easily be turned around so that it says where no premises license is held, but there is a wish to provide category D gaming machines, application may be made to the licensing authority for this permit. And then when it goes on, it should be noted that the applicant must show you've got a human applicant suggested or implied throughout, rather than making it sound as if the building decided to fill in the form itself. That's just, there were a couple more, I think, where the same thing happened within the next page or two, and I can't see the others, but if anybody spots another case where the machine's doing it itself, the same, I think, could be done by turning it passive and saying, where none is held. All right?
Keith, are you content with that?
Yeah, as I was going through the 300-page document of the Gambling Commission, when it came to the detail, the legal definitions, there was a temptation to just take it and just put it in there. But I think you're right. Some of the wording, if it's acceptable to the chair, we will go back and have a look at that and try to apply plain English. And thank you very much for that comment.
Thank you, Linda. That would be excellent, Keith, and that would satisfy Linda in her methodical way that she always picks up things on agendas. Sarah, sorry. Keith, you mentioned that Mattershall Parish Council requested a local area profile, but they didn't provide any stats or reasons for requiring it. Are we content with making a response to them?
Yeah, so what we would like to do is, first and foremost, thank people that responded. And I think that's always an important thing to do. And we will go back to Mattershall, and I will probably have a conversation with the individual. But basically, where they were coming from, and it is quite a strong recommendation from the Gambling Commission. But when I've looked at the detail and the examples that are given from GamCare, for example, they always refer to metropolitan boroughs. And working in a metropolitan borough like I have done, it's not the same contextual sort of problems that we have in Breckland. So the one that GamCare sort of like alluded to, which was a 67-page document, which was brilliant, I mean, for Westminster, but for Breckland, it wouldn't have been appropriate. And the amount of resources and time that it would have taken on without having the evidence that we could provide would not be in my opinion, in the interests of Breckland Council. So we will go back and see if I can get further information. But what we did as a catch-all, if you like, is to bring it back on a yearly basis and see if we can indeed find any further evidence and bring it back to the committee. And if we can find further evidence, we will bring it back to the committee for it to be considered further. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, if I could just support that as well, what Keith is saying there. So there were two representations, one from GamCare and one from Mattershall Council, Parish Council, about the local area profile. So we've considered that representation, and I think the officer's view is that Josie and Keith did quite a lot of detailed looking there. The risk of gambling harm is very low. So I think what we're saying is we don't consider it at this moment in time necessary and proportionate, but we have taken those representations on board. And as Keith said, as a safeguard, what we will do is we will look at that on a yearly basis and we'll report that back to the licensing committee. So I don't know if that assures you a little bit. So we've not ignored it. We've considered it. We've come to a measured sort of decision, but we have put a safeguard in there about that annual review to look at that in light of those representations or those responses to the consultation.
Thank you, Keith. I think it is challenging to monitor online gambling. It's a very difficult thing. I mean, it's something that's very private to the person that's conducting it. But just to say at the end, I'm sure committee are aware that we don't have any casinos in Breckland. I think our nearest casino is at Great Yarmouth. Isn't it? Yeah, anyway.
I'm not sure if it's Great Yarmouth or King's Lynn, but it's quite a distance away. But we can find that out if you.
No,
if
no,
you
no,
would so
not
wish.
at all. I know there's one in Great Yarmouth. I didn't know there was one in King's Lynn. Linda, do you have another question? Yes, I've seen Sarah. Sarah.
Thank you. So I, sadly, am not reassured about the local area profile, and there's a number of reasons for that. So Mattershall did give a reason, and that's because it is the strong recommendation set out by the Gambling Commission, which I think we need to recognise. I'm a little bit puzzled, if I'm honest, about why the threshold or a threshold for developing a local area profile might be reports coming into the council of gambling harm, when people are more likely to report that through one of the various charitable bodies and that kind of thing. I think the chances of it ending up here are relatively low because it's a personal, private, psychological challenge and not something that necessarily is going to wind its way here. So I don't think that's the right threshold. You can also know, Craig, I'm just going to pick you up. We don't have a very low incidence of gambling harm. We have a lower than average, but only just. And actually, when you look at the data, what we do have in Breckland is a very low uptake of help and support by people who are affected by high gambling risk and gambling harm. And to my mind, that is far more dangerous and concerning. If the support isn't available and we are not making it available for licensees or prospective licensees to deal with in their risk assessment, then actually there becomes an increasing gulf between the support that people require and their ability to get it and the ability of licensees to mitigate that risk. And ultimately, that is what the local area profile seeks to do. Now, having made it my business to have a look at this, I know there's a great wealth of information that could go into these. Some authorities do these with a very light touch, and they seek to use demographic information that is already held within the authorities. So I think it's really important to understand that much of this information is a collation exercise. It is not bringing together or creating new data. It's simply collating it in a useful way to ensure that those risk assessments are appropriate and look to mitigate. And I think given that context of just lower than the national average, and as you rightly point out, we're dealing with major metropolitan areas and the areas with highly accessible gambling opportunities, and we're only just below the average, even with as few in real life opportunities, that says something. And then I think that the inability or the resistance, whatever that is, of people to access support, I think is really troubling. And I think it is incumbent on us as a licensing authority to make sure that prospective licensees are properly equipped to mitigate that risk. And without that, they're not.
So from our point of view, thanks a lot for the points that you raised. And we did try our best to get the information. We went out to partners like you would expect. And basically, like yourself, we want to keep an eye on this. But from our point of view, there isn't any sort of like intelligence, there isn't any evidence out there at the moment. It doesn't mean to say we're not going to go looking for it. And that's why we put in the safety net to go back on a yearly basis and give us time to talk to our partners and see what further evidence is available, and really sort of like have a look at this. First time that we've ever mentioned going back to the committee to do this piece of work, because we feel that we do need to keep an eye on it. We've not taken it lightly, but from our point of view, there's nothing stopping us that if we do go back to the committee, we can go back and revise the policy again if we needed to. But we are running out of time as well. And this piece of work, to go into detail, would take several months at least, and maybe specialist sort of like, consultants as well. And looking at the evidence that I could find, and we did do that piece of work, and you're quite right, it's different contextually if we're dealing with Westminster and what we are doing here, but it doesn't mean to say that as we move on, we don't pick up more sort of like detailed problems or evidence that we could link into it. And that's the reason why we put in a safety net to go back to the committee on a yearly basis, or even sooner if we needed to.
Thank you, Keith.
So can I?
Yes, Sarah, you come up.
Right.
I
So
jump
my
in.
understanding that the policy that we've currently got was adopted in 2022, yeah? So the Gambling Commission's strong recommendation has been since at least April 2021 that a local area profile be provided. So why was it not provided in the 2022 policy?
Okay, so the general comment by the Commission was a blanket for everyone. And basically, there were, you know, if we have a look around Norfolk, you may have picked up that there's not too many, I think there's only one council that's looked at it, and that is the King's Lynn. And I think they've got more specific sort of like problems, could be. But from the rest of from my understanding, there's not a lot of local authorities, certainly rural, that have actually developed a local profile. But as I said, you know, from our point of view, we realise there could be an ongoing sort of like issue, and we're not sneaking away from it, and we will come back to it. But I think from what I can ascertain by speaking with other colleagues, basically it all depends on the location you are. So it's either rural or sort of like, you know, sort of like built up areas or whatever it would be. So it all depends on where you are. So even though they made a strong recommendation, there's still many authorities that haven't done this piece of work. But we would like to sort of like build on where we are now.
Do you want to carry on, Sarah? Yes, do.
Thank you. So I obviously just need to learn the mechanics of this committee, because some are extremely procedural, everything going in and out of the chair, and others not. So Marion, please shout me down if I start to, you know, deviate from the required mechanism. So in the report, there is mention of vulnerable people or vulnerable persons, and the report, the proposed policy comments that the Gambling Commission doesn't offer a definition of vulnerable persons. So I would just observe that while they don't define that precise phrase, they provide a completely comprehensive definition of vulnerability and other vulnerable persons. And my concern is that by not acknowledging this is page 15 of the proposed policy, we are missing the fact that the Gambling Commission puts emphasis on young adults who are at high risk of gambling harm. And so our policy is now silent on that, because to my reading at page 15, we don't incorporate the full basis of vulnerability that the Gambling Commission sets out. And that is a concern to me, particularly in the absence of a local area profile. So I think if it's going back for a rewrite, it does need to be rewritten with respect to the vulnerability point, especially in the absence of a local area profile. My other sort of observation would be that there's nothing in the report. I appreciate there's some comments around groups of our community, that there's no equality impact assessment screening or commentary on that. So I'm now getting a little bit concerned because of the lack of local area profile, the weakness in the vulnerability definition. Has an EQIA screening been undertaken for this? Because ultimately the strong recommendation is that that is done for a new policy.
So we haven't done that piece of work, but as I said, you know, when we've gone out there and tried to find evidence, we're just not finding the evidence. But I take on board what you're saying. But that's the reason why we would like to come back to it, to a committee, and sort of like review it on a regular basis. And that's the first time that we've ever put that forward.
I appreciate the difficulty given the compliance point in the new year. I do think that is, yeah, that is, I appreciate the challenge there, but I am now very concerned that there's a lot of gaps in the way that this has been developed and that we're being asked as an authority to consider this policy position. So my view at this point is that we need to be cognisant of the fact that the government review actually was looking at cumulative impact assessments. The step below that, which is what Mattishall Parish Council allude to, is the local area profile. I'm just going to touch very slightly on the kind of inherent irony here of the fact that we've brilliantly been awarded, I'm not diminishing this at all because it is brilliant, we've been awarded a Paul Prince Award for the RSPCA, which has as one of their remit the fact that the winners reach beyond legal minimums, right? So we are reaching beyond legal minimums for kennelling, all of this kind of really good stuff. Let's not get rid of that. But I would observe that we are absolutely not reaching beyond the legal minimums around an area where there is demonstrable harm. There is data out there within a 2-minute search on Google through the Gambling Commission to see that our residents who are exposed to that and their families are not getting the support that they need. I think there is a really deep need for us to take that seriously and just do that collation exercise to get that local area profile in place. So my thinking at the moment is that rework is needed. Either way, not least taking point of Councillor Monument's point of view, in terms of the report, now unless my diary is shockingly wrong, which do you know what, it very well may be, the council in the report, the report is saying that it needs to go to council on the 26th of October, but I think that's a Saturday. So I think the council is actually meeting on the 17th of October. We have a licensing authority meeting on the 6th of November and then full council on the 5th of December. So to my mind, there is definitely time to do some rework. We might not like it, but to my mind, there is an opportunity to do some rework. Do you want to just...
My team leader may not understand. The December council is actually too late because we have to publish a notice 4 weeks ahead publicly that the policy is going live. So if December council is after that date, which it is because it has to go live on the 3rd of January, so it would have to be the 3rd of December before we have to do it before the 3rd of December to get it approved to actually then put the notice out. Does that make sense?
That's really helpful, thank you. I think it'd be good to get those kind of gateway points and constraints actually written into the report in future so that we're making an informed choice. So I think that's all of my sort of observations. I think there probably is an option C in here, which, because at the moment I think it would be extremely unwise for us to send it to council just with a blanket recommendation to adopt. My preference would be that it goes to council with the view to approve the policy to almost on a temporary basis for 1 year, which then gives officers a 12-month period to prepare that local area profile. And then in a year's time, we're in a position to be able to adopt a more sort of satisfactory, both linguistically and policy basis kind of policy, which reflects the recommendations of the Gambling Commission.
Thank you, Sarah. I think, Keith, with the Challenge 25, which is obviously used in premises, how do the online gambling companies deal with that Challenge 25?
So from my point of view, from the understanding from the Gambling Commission, they're bringing in extra sort of like vulnerability checks, and from that, so online is not covered by local authorities, but from my understanding, the actual vulnerability checks that the Gambling Commission want to put in, which won't be part of what we do, would be sort of like to verify some of the online players as a if they think there's a vulnerability issue. So, but online sort of like gambling is not covered by local authority.
Okay, thank you. I'm going back a number of years now, but as far as identifying the situation of people who are at risk, I remember when I was at the Citizens Advice Bureau, people normally, I generalise here and I shouldn't do, but often the awareness of people's vulnerability only raises its head when people fall into debt. The addiction side is a different side, but when the debt raises its head, then things often come to light. Either from the CAB or from doctors' surgeries, or so. I think that the fact that the situation will be reviewed yearly, giving officers the time to gather further information on vulnerability, rather than asking for a local profile to be started now. Don't we have time frames to get this across the line, Josie?
So as we said, the December Council is too late to get this across the timeframe because of the public notice that has to be published, which is why it's going to the November Council. 17th of October. Sorry, October 1, yeah. 17th of October. Yeah.
Thank you, Josie. So, as I said, in past experience, I think the actual identification of vulnerable people, if they don't come forward to admit that they have problems, is a very, very difficult thing to profile. Do you have any comments on that, Keith?
I think it's really just coming back and just reinforcing the comments I've made already. We only can do what we can do, and I take on board, we should be looking, to do even more, and I think we will. But it is very difficult. I mean, the partners that we've consulted with, Norfolk Police, for example, we didn't get any comments back from them or any sort of like red flags. But we shouldn't rest on our laurels, and I totally agree on that. But I think the recommendation of bringing it back to the committee would be an ideal sort of opportunity to have a look at that. But we're under a legal obligation to make sure we've got a policy in place, and I know you appreciate that, and the time restraints are sort of like quite tight. But as we move on, there's nothing to stop us if the committee think it's a good idea to have a look at aspects of the sort of like the area profile or vulnerability, and you know what I mean. But that's why we put the recommendation in.
Thank you, Keith. Sarah Taylor, do you have anything you want to add?
Some interesting comments and some food for thought. I'm sure the officers will go back and work on that.
Okay, thank you. Well, committee, we have the recommendation, and thank you. Oh, sorry. Craig, yes. Sorry, I was looking up at Linda.
Yeah, if that's okay. So I think just taking on board the comments, I think what we're saying, and just to be clear really, is that we've listened to those comments, we've listened to the consultation, we are looking at reviewing to move towards reviewing whether a local area profile is necessary or not. We haven't, again, if we need to go back to rework the policy prior to that October date, we do not have the capacity in-house to do that. So if you wanted that, there will be a budgetary implication because we would have to get some external consultants or somebody in there. So we don't have, unfortunately, in the time period that we have, the legal timescales. I can't look backwards what the GamCare said in 2022. I wasn't, or 21 or whatever, last time we consulted. But that only came in, I think, in sort of June, the end of June. So we're doing what we can. If we did need to rework it, we would need extra resource to do that. And I think, sorry, the suggestion is also, do we do a temporary policy for a year and then we review it? I think what we're saying anyway, I'm not sure what we would achieve by that, because what we're saying is we will review it anyway. Sorry, what we will do is we will come back to the licensing committee within those 12 months to review it and make a recommendation. Obviously, then if the committee resolve that we do need to make one, then obviously officers will do that. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is I can't really see by just doing a temporary 12-month policy what we achieve. I would suggest we went with the 3-year, but we are going to put that 12-month review in there. But yeah, so that's just a point of response. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Keith. So we'll come back for a review in a year's time. Do we have any other questions, Linda?
Not so much a question, but looking at the introduction, the background, first thing on this report, we're told Section 349 of Gambling Act 2005 requires the licensing authority to prepare and publish a policy. It then goes on to say the policy will last for a maximum of 3 years, but can be reviewed and revised by the licensing authority at any time. So I'm proposing formally that we support option B, because then we've got a 3-year policy. We're not running ourselves to the same silly situation in 12 months' time that we're running against a date if we had only gone for a 1-year policy. But if we've got a 3-year policy and we're reviewing it, then if the decision of the result is that there's work to be done on the, and the word's gone out of my head, on the profile, as long as we have started reviewing it within the first year, then if it looks like it's going to take 18 months to prepare it, we can look at that as a time frame within our 3-year policy. So I think that's the more workable situation. If we decide we don't need it, we've got to come back in a year's time. But I would like to know that it will be looked at before this time next year, if that is the case, because we're proposing with Section B, Option B, that we'll review every year on the profile. But I definitely think we need the 3-year policy.
Well, before we go to a seconder for that proposal, Sarah.
Thank you. So just out of line of sight because my glasses. Can we just separate out a couple of things? So there's a question around the written content of the policy as it stands now, which Councillor Monument and myself have just made a couple of observations about the passive voice in it, around vulnerability point. I don't know whether there is time and scope to tweak that prior to anything going to council on the 17th. My concern really boils down to the fact that I don't want a check on the local area profile. I think we need one. Norwich City Council also have a local area profile, so it isn't just, you know, it isn't just Kings Lynn. But the point is, I think it is ultimately there to ensure that risk assessments undertaken by us as an authority and also by prospective licensees and renewals are done to appropriately mitigate risk. And so my question fundamentally is, you're saying, you collectively, we are saying that we don't know where the risk is or we're not able to identify it, but I have observed that within 5 minutes of looking, I've been able to identify data around high gambling risk, harm and access to services in Breckland. So I'm concerned around that. Just on Councillor Monument's point, if we're able to take, if perhaps an adjusted option B, which sees the policy going to council with a recommendation to approve and with a local area profile to be created within the 3-year period, then that makes it clear that a local area profile will be done in recognition of the risks inherent to gambling. It gives time and space for resourcing purposes to actually get that going. And then it satisfies me that that risk assessment piece can be more kind of surgically undertaken.
Sarah, could I just ask you where you were able to get this data from if our officers weren't able to find this? Be very interesting.
Yeah, I'm happy to share that. We can work collaboratively. It's on my home computer, not on my iPad, but yeah, can certainly. There's a piece of work done with an 18,000 person population nationally, looking at access to services for PEGI 8 level gambling harm, which is the highest level of gambling harm. So I'm sure that there will be flaws in the methodology, because there always are, but I think it's of interest to see it can broken down by authority in a similar way that kind of election polls are. But there's a wealth of information out there. It's just having the time and the resource to actually
I'm sorry,
do something
I must
with
have
it.
misunderstood you, because I thought you said that you'd got data for Breckland.
I did, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's disaggregated down into Breckland data. It's not created by the authority. There are different sort of routes for getting data, different data sets nationally and locally.
Keith.
So when we did our research, initial research, we used GAM aware. Okay, so it gave all that. So we're not saying there isn't any risk there. What we're saying is that we're below the averages. So I think that's it's a good starting point. And also from the consultation and where we were looking for, obviously on our sort of records, we couldn't find anything that would pinpoint us to those vulnerability. And it may be that we need to do some further work if that's what the committee wants us to do. But I think it would be quite useful outside the committee to have a chat with you, so we know exactly the areas, what we can do and what we can't do. And likewise with sort of like any wording, which I would like to do that, and we can pick that up as well, just to move it forward.
Yeah, I'm really happy to do that. I think my observation is around vulnerability. It is exactly as Councillor Chapman-Allen said, it is around those other kind of indicators. Homelessness, that's obviously salient to our work as an authority. Kind of young adults and teenagers are highly exposed to it now, not necessarily online, but I mean, we just know that. So there's lots of kind of, the Venn diagram of overlap of interest with other parts of Breckland Council is complex and is very present, which is why I think it's as much a collation exercise, that local area profile. When I look at other authorities, it's as much a collation exercise and getting that available for risk assessment purposes than it is creating new, it's not about creating new data necessarily.
Okay, Craig.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean this to sound. I think we're quite willing to have a look at the wording for vulnerability. I'm not sure I quite still fully understand where you believe that falls short. I mean, the document is talking about on page 14, protecting children and other vulnerable persons. It then goes on to list what a vulnerable person is. It says the above lists are not exhaustive. As regards vulnerable persons, it gives, sorry, this is not exhaustive, but it's but indicative examples. Some examples are given below. It then refers to Appendix 5 and Appendix 6. So Appendix 5 talks about safeguarding children, and Appendix 6 talks about safeguarding vulnerable adults. And then what the risks to vulnerable adults, who is a vulnerable adult, and managing the risks and social responsibility. So I'm quite happy to engage, but I'm not sorry, I don't quite understand where you think that falls short of what we need to put in. We obviously cannot cover every example, and we're giving examples in there, but I'd welcome, we're quite happy to amend it, but I just don't quite understand where you think it falls short. Sorry, still got my microphone on, sorry. Oh.
Great. So yeah, let's separate this out. So that point is almost an editing point. So on page 15, beg your pardon, it talks about, as regards vulnerable persons, it's noted that the Gambling Commission has not defined a vulnerable person. And my reading is that that is correct, in that it hasn't defined a vulnerable person in that specific phrasing, but there is a as you've just kind of said, there's a lot of common ground here. It's like, this point is more of a tightening and housekeeping point. I'm not saying that this is like some fundamental flaw in this. My thinking here is that the Gambling Commission provides a comprehensive definition of vulnerability, as you've just sort of articulated, and it also defines other vulnerable people. My concern in this paragraph specifically is that whilst it might be factually correct in that it doesn't define that specific phrase, that implies that the Gambling Commission doesn't define vulnerability. Do you see what I mean? So it's a housekeeping point as much as anything. And then in the examples in there, my concern is that just by not acknowledging overtly that vulnerability definition as held by the Gambling Commission, we're just missing the young adults piece, which is explicitly kind of baked into the Gambling Commission. That's all that point is. I was using that as an example of just some of the gaps in the policy as it currently stands, which concerns me around that risk assessment process that prospective licensees and the authority has to do. But it's actually more of an editing point. Does that make sense?
Yes, Keith.
Yeah, sorry, can I?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, we can look at that. I think the Gambling Commission do not define it for a particular, well, they don't specifically go into detail because it leaves the definition of what is a vulnerable person open to interpretation, doesn't it? And whilst I think also it says that the Gambling Commission has not defined a vulnerable person, but states it will assume that this group will include people who gamble more than they want to, people who gamble beyond their means, people who not be able to make informed or balanced decisions due to their mental impairment, alcohol or drugs. Whilst the Gambling Act does not prohibit vulnerable groups in the same manner as children, it then goes on to list measures, etc. So I think what we're trying to say, is we're not just saying they've not defined it, they don't, but they assume that it will include these types of people. And I would respectfully suggest that the Gambling Commission doesn't define it. They've done that for a reason, and we shouldn't either. We should leave, that open to interpretation, so we have some flexibility in that wording.
Thank you, Keith. Well, I've noted that the Gambling Commission doesn't define vulnerability. I'll go back to Linda. Linda, do you still want to make your proposal?
I was proposing that we follow option B. I guess that is probably the best way I can see to cope with it. I'm not sure. I'm going to propose option B as our best route. That doesn't exclude the possibility that we then go ahead and get on with looking into having a profile, sorting out a profile. But it doesn't commit us to adopting one, which I think Sarah's suggestion does. Now, generally, having heard what she said, I'm inclined to think we may well need one, but we haven't looked into how long it will take us to do it and what the resources and financial side of it are to produce one. So I think all of that needs researching and can be done best with a 3-year open line once the policy is signed off, so that we can then get on with it. And I think that's the proposal I'm making. It's up to the rest of the committee to decide whether they think that does seem the best idea or doesn't go far enough. If Sarah wants to propose an amendment, let's hear what the others say.
Thank you, Linda. Sue, your proposal is that the Committee of the Licensing Authority recommend full council that they approve the proposed revised policy, but request that officers review the need for a gambling local area profile on a yearly basis and submit the findings of the reviews to the Licensing Committee for consideration. Do I have a seconder for Linda's proposal? Have you got that, Julie? Sarah?
So yeah, as mentioned, I would like to propose an amendment to it. And Craig, I've got the Gambling Commission in front of me, so we'll have a chat afterwards. And I'll show you the bit that I've been referring to, and that will clarify that point, I think. So I would propose that there is an amendment to option B, so that the committee recommends the policy to council to be approved, and that the officers produce a local area profile within the 3-year period. As Councillor Monument said, this has a maximum lifetime of 3 years in any case, this policy. So I think it does need to go with that recommendation to both adopt this policy and that a local area profile will be developed for the authority within the 3-year period.
Or the amendment to the amendment?
The amendment.
Yes.
So
Thank you, Julie.
I'm 99% sure that the amendment should read that the Committee of the Licensing Authority recommend to full council that they approve the proposed revised policy, but request that officers review the need for a gambling local area profile on a yearly basis and submit the findings of the review to the Licensing Committee for consideration, and that a local area profile to be produced within a 3-year period.
So close but no cigar. so basically, it would go, the Committee of the Licensing Authority recommend to full council that they approve the proposed revised policy and that officers produce a local area profile within the lifetime of the policy, i.e. the 3-year period. Because did you get that, Julie? Sorry, before I carry on talking. Great, thank you. Because my concern is that we've already been through one policy, which is in the lifetime of the strong recommendation of the Gambling Commission, and nothing has come from that. And ultimately, the local area profile is the strong recommendation because it facilitates better risk assessment and mitigation processes. So my concern at every licensing meeting will be how robust is that risk assessment? How confident are we? How assured are we as a committee that licensee's proposals are appropriately mitigating risk for that exact location? And I think it is sensible for all of us to be able to make those informed decisions around risk, because that is a requirement of that licensing process. And I certainly would feel more comfortable with that local area profile under development.
Thank you, Sarah. Craig and Keith.
Yeah, I mean, I think, sorry, Josie's also saying that the Gambling Commission were consulted and they didn't mention about the need for a gambling area profile. I think my concern, unfortunately, and unfortunately legal services manager's not here, but we would probably need some legal advice. My concern is that if we propose to do a local area profile, that does need to be evidence-based. So if we were legally challenged, i.e. a premises came out and judicially reviewed us, whatever, so we're almost deciding to do it before we've actually carried out the work to review it and we've actually looked at the evidence. So my only concern is yes, we will do it, but if we actually say we are going to do it and we commit that we are going to do it, what evidence base do we have? I don't know, but I'm just suggesting that we're almost predetermining it and we're pre-deciding it before we based it on the piece of work and the evidence before it. But we would, obviously legal services not here, but I think my concern is that I would like, or would suggest that there could be a risk there of that. So yeah, the risk of needing some legal advice on that.
Thank you, Craig. So we will go back to Councillor Taylor's amendment to the proposal, which was Julie on a yearly basis to look at our profile on a yearly basis within 3 years, was it?
Sorry, Julie, I was getting distracted by my iPad.
I thought the recommendation, let's just pick a page number, on page 7 at the heading of agenda item 6 was that we approve the policy but request that officers review the need for gambling local area profile on a yearly basis and submit findings. I thought that Sarah had taken out the words but request and everything that follows, and wanted to put in and do it effectively. So I think we've got two choices here in front of us. I know somewhere further down and I can't find it. Option B is not to say anything about the gambling local area profile. Option B has what we've got on page 7. I'm supporting the recommendation in bold type at the top of page 7. And I think I was wondering whether I should say no, I concede I accept the amendment to this recommendation. Having heard what they've said and in the absence of the legal advisor, I think I'm going to stick with this on the basis that if we review it and find there's a need for it, we can get on with it. And it can be adopted in less than 3 years if it can be finished in less than 3 years. That provides a framework for doing both without needing legal backing today. So I'm standing by my
So that is the recommendation on page 7.
Yeah, the recommendation. My recommendation is on page 7. Sarah's is the same, I think, for the first 2 lines, but it goes on without the yearly reviewing to a straight proposal. Your second bit for Julie's benefit. Can you read it out? And then they'll know for sure. Sorry.
So Julie, could you...
You want it?
Sorry, Sarah,
That's quite all
are you
right.
changing it again?
No, I am reiterating it for the benefit of everyone. So the proposed amendment is that, so the full thing would be that the Committee of the Licensing Authority recommend to full council that they approve the proposed revised policy contained at Appendix 2 to this report, and that officers review, beg your pardon, and that officers produce a local area profile for Breckland within the policy period.
Right, so take that out.
Thank you.
Yep. So do we have a seconder for Councillor Taylor's proposal? Thank you, Kendra. And Julie, yes, could we take a vote on it, please? I was going to ask you to read it out. Because I've got so many crossings out now. It is option B, yeah.
Option B.
Are we voting on the amendment first?
Yeah, voting on the amendment first. This is Sarah's amendment. That the Committee of the Licensing Authority recommend to full council that they approve the proposed revised policy contained at Appendix 2 to this report, and that officers produce a gambling local area profile within the policy period. That's Sarah's recommendation. Amended recommendation.
Now, before I go to the vote, Craig, is this a feasible thing for officers to do within the time frame to produce a local area profile? Because if we haven't got the solicitor here to advise us, because if it's not, and it's going to incur
Sorry, I think,
unfound costs.
do you mean within the 12 months
Yeah.
period?
3 years.
Is that the...
Within 3 years.
No, that's not yours. I'm explaining what the two differences are. yours is the one that says we will actually produce local area profile. And option B is to look at whether we need to do it, and if we need it, then we will produce it. They're the two differences.
Yeah, Marion's question was the timescale, wasn't it? So were you asking me within the 12? Is it feasible within a 12 period in 3 years? So,
Keith,
So I'm clear, okay. We are talking about if we adopt what we're saying, okay, within the next period, which starts in 2025. If I've got this clear, please stop me. Okay, we have 3 years to have a look at the area profile and determine whether we need it or not. Or are you saying that we actually do need it and we're going to go forward with it? Is that the proposal?
So my proposed amendment is that it go to committee for adoption and that the local area profile is produced within the lifetime of that policy, i.e. 3 years, so that we are delivering it. We are delivering that local area profile within that 3-year period.
Sarah, did you mean council and not committee? That it goes to council for adoption?
Yeah, I'm just trying to explain to Keith because he's seeking clarification on the timescales. So the timescales are 3 years.
You can, Keith?
Yeah. So it's
Anything for clarification?
So it's just really clarifying. Okay, so I think I'm with you on that, but it is for the full council to adopt the policy regardless. And unfortunately, it's not for the committee. So as long as we've got that understanding, and also the understanding that we're talking about, if the adoption does go ahead, it's from 25, so we have 3 years to do that.
So I'm pretty confident at this point. Julie's minuted me saying both of those things at least twice. So yes, the recommendation is for it go to council and that officers prepare the local area profile within the 3-year period of the policy. So as we discussed earlier, I understand those timeframes. They're very obviously challenging, that this policy needs to be in place by January in order to satisfy that statutory requirement. So I have no interest in impeding the ability of the council to tick that statutory box, absolutely none. What I'm trying to do is make sure that our risk assessments that are produced by the licensing authority and by prospective licensees are accurate, able to actually respond to local needs and mitigate them well, which is why I'm asking that the recommendation be amended so that the council agree to both adopt the policy and that the local area profile be developed over the 3-year period. Hopefully that helped.
Thank you, Sarah. Kendra?
So just to add in, formally seconding that amendment, my understanding therefore is that at the end, with the amendment, there will definitely be a local area profile at the end of the 3 years, whereas the unamended one, there might well be, but there's not 100% certainty. So I'm seconding the amendment because in 3 years I want the local area profile to be a thing, if that's helpful.
Officers, I note that you said, Craig, and the document says that the Gambling Commission didn't raise the need for local area profiles. So before we set this rolling, do you have anything further to say after the clarification
Okay.
of the
Obviously it's
change to the recommendation?
for members to vote, and we'll do whatever you decide. Again, I think just as the local area profile, the Gambling Commission were, all the parish councils were, Norfolk Police, Norfolk Trading Standards, Norfolk Fire and Rescue, Norfolk Safeguarding Children Board, Breckland Planning Department, the MP, Alcoholics Anonymous, Gambling Anonymous, Citizens Advice, Shine Mental Health Services, MENCAP, Mind Mental Health Charity, British Amusement and Catering Trade Association, the Bingos Association, the British Bookmakers Association, the British Beer and Pub Association, the British Institute of Innkeeping, other Norfolk District Councils, Breckland Council Environmental Health, adult gaming centres, family entertainment centres and bingo premises licence holders, and the Gambling Commission all didn't ask for us to raise a local area profile. And my only other submission is that if we are going to produce a local area statement, it needs to be evidence-based. So what I'm trying to say is if we resolved that we are going to do it, the evidence needs to be there to do it, and if we are challenged and the evidence is not there, we could be judicially reviewed and we could lose it. So I think we'd have to take some legal advice, but my concern is that it needs to be evidence-based. And
Thank you, Craig. Well, you've just actually said the question that I was going to ask, that before this recommendation goes in its change form to full council, do you need to take legal advice from the head of legal services as to whether this change to the recommendation or alteration to the recommendation is valid?
I think that would be beneficial, yes.
Sarah, Samantha.
I'm happy with recommendations of our officers. Obviously, this is their area. Is it on now? No, it keeps turning up. Now it's all right. It's warmed itself up. Personally, I believe we have to have faith and trust our officers. This is their area of expertise. They do it day in and day out. And if they feel that they need to seek extra clarification from our legal teams, then I believe that we should give them the grace to do that.
Thank you, Sam. Sarah.
Thank you. So just on the consultees point, I wasn't going to ask this, but I will as you raise it. Which MENCAP did you send it to? Because obviously there isn't an organisation called MENCAP.
We can check that. I think I'm being told that would be the local one, but yeah.
So we've had
So that's Mid Norfolk MENCAP, not Royal MENCAP Society. Okay, so it'd be good just from a point of accuracy to get the correct consultee details in the policy, please. In terms of the consultation responses, it's really, really common for people to not respond. I think given the fact that there is clear guidance and a strong recommendation for the Gambling Commission around the use of local area profiles, I'm not sure that it's a particular surprise that they didn't respond to the consultation at all. If they did respond, they would have, I'm sure, reiterated that point, but we will never know because they didn't respond, presumably because that guidance is already very well established over several years and in the public domain. What is an observable fact is of the 5 people or organisations that responded, 2 mentioned a local area profile as good practice. So, and I'm a little bit puzzled. If we're discussing a policy, I appreciate that Sarah passed her apologies on. The committee is discussing a policy with a view to recommend. It's a bit odd that we don't have legal advice here or monitoring officer here so that we can check the validity of recommendations going forward, because this is another delay in the process, which is not great.
Well, I think it was stated at the beginning of the meeting, Councillor Taylor, that unfortunately the head of legal services was not able to be here because of illness. So therefore,
yeah, and
we don't have somebody to sit in her place.
Yeah, and that's why I said it's a shame with her apologies, because it would have been helpful, because now there's another delay to that.
It would have been helpful, but I honestly, having gone through it with the officers beforehand, I honestly didn't think that given the depth of the document, the fact that the Gambling Commission did not raise the need for a local area profile. It's not something when I talked to officers and said, do you think that there are going to be any challenges over this? And so that's where I stand with this. Steve?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I think we've given it a good airing and I think we should move to the vote.
Sorry, I apologise. Would it be beneficial, Chair, if you want, I don't know, what I was going to suggest is, I understand that legal service manager is at work, she isn't very well, and she didn't want to risk sort of coming in and infecting people with symptoms. Would it be beneficial? I can't guarantee whether I can get hold of her, but whether I speak to her. Sorry.
And I'm afraid we'd have to take the vote first on Sarah's to see if that's actually carried. Otherwise, we're going to go back to Linda's vote on option B. So, you know, it might be not a waste of time, but obviously we need to know whether the vote is carried or not. Okay.
So,
Sorry.
Julie, could you read out Sarah's amendment, please?
I can find it.
And we'll take a vote on it.
This is the amended recommendation from Councillor Sarah Taylor, that the Committee of the Licensing Authority recommend to full council that they approve the proposed revised policy contained in Appendix 2 to this report, and that officers produce a gambling local area profile within the policy within a 3-year period.
Okay. So could we have a vote, please, on the amendment? All those for the amendment? And those against? So the amendment is lost.
Sorry.
Sorry?
Sorry, was that Linda as well? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yes.
But that vote is lost, so we go back.
So we go back to Linda Turner's.
No,
Linda.
not Linda. Monument.
I've got too many Turners and too many Taylors. So we go back to Linda Monuments, which was option B. Yes?
On page 7.
On page 7. So given the recommendation from Linda Monument, could we take a vote, please? For those that get for? Oh, I didn't see them.
No, I didn't see them. So that's 7, 6 on that one. 7, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2.
Incidentally, if you need it for your paperwork, I'm not sure if anybody seconded it the first time I said it.
You did.
We did,
did.
yes.
Yes,
It was Sam and Steve.
No. I have that.
And so that recommendation from
It did. I did have you down.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Well, that's been a very, very interesting debate. Slightly confusing at times, but nevertheless a very interesting debate. And so the recommendation has been carried to go to full council. Right. Moving on to item 7, Josie. Can you clear the air by giving us a verbal update on member training?
Yes. So
Thank you, Steve. Okay.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Democratic Services sent out an email with 2 dates on for member training to take place for members of the Licensing Committee. That training is confirmed as Friday, the 11th of October from 10 until 12. It will be myself and Sarah Walton-Holmes-My giving that training. just to give you an idea of what it covers for those of you who haven't already attended, who are most welcome to attend again if you wish to for a refresher. It will be an overview of the licensing function of the council, how the committee structure works and panel hearings, preparing for hearings, questioning techniques, decisions and how they are delivered, and the outcomes of those decisions. So that's basically what it's going to cover for the types of panels and committee hearings that you will be dealing with as members of the licensing committee. Does anybody have any question on that? I hope you can. Yes, certainly. It's Friday, the 11th of October, 10 till 12 in the Woodpecker room.
In the Woodpecker.
But we will send an email confirmation out as well. I think we've only got 4 people accepted so far.
I've accepted.
Yeah.
Yes, I will. I was just going to say that I've accepted. It's always good to have a refresh. Sarah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make clear, because although I am that person who's like, where's my training? Unfortunately, I'm still waiting to hear from an inquiry when I have to give evidence, and it looks very much like it is that week. So, I mean, you just could not make this up. So I should find out, hopefully, I don't want to jinx it, but I should find out early next week. So, Julie, I think I tentatively accepted it, and it's completely out of my control, obviously. I am not able to change those dates, but I will do what I can to attend. If I am having to give evidence, it will be not in Norfolk. So would there be an option to dial in if I am able to create time, even if I'm not physically here? That's the only thing.
We don't have facilities. In the Woodpecker room, we have the facilities, do we? Well, Sarah, it would be good if you were able to dial in. In the meantime, I know that I hope I did send details over. I think the officers did, on the fact that the LGA have a very, very full, precise information on licensing, and they also have what's the word, Julie, when you modules, online modules. And so I did that. Oh gosh, time flies. When that was sent out, so it must be 6 weeks ago, and I actually did the modules, and they were very good. They were very helpful. So if you've got time that you wish to, in your busy schedule, to have a look at them, they are very, very helpful indeed. And most of the information, apart from the verbal update from officers, in the room, they tell us everything that we really need to know as far as licensing and the panels and the rules and what happens. So it is very interesting if you're able to. Could I encourage members who've had training before, if you're free, do come along. It would be good to see you there. Josie, do you have anything else you want to add? No? Well, in that case, thank you very much, councillors. Close the meeting. The next meeting will be held on Wednesday, the 6th of November, here in the Anglia Room, following the licensing committee that starts at 10 a.m. Thank you, and the meeting's now closed.